In the vast darkness of space, a strange signal echoed. It wasn't loud, but it was constant. A faint hum traveled across the stars, moving through space like a whisper that refused to be ignored. The signal was coming from an area of space that had been long abandoned. It was beyond the reach of most alien species. This was a place where only the brave, or perhaps the foolish, ventured. And it was here that the aliens first noticed something peculiar. The signal seemed to come from a ship. But not just any ship. It was a human warship. The alien fleet, led by Commander Zelker, had been patrolling the outer edges of the galaxy when they picked up the unusual signal. Zelker was experienced, having led countless missions across the stars. He had seen alien technology from hundreds of species. But this was different. Something about this signal pulled him in. He wasn't sure why, but it felt important. Like a message they were meant to receive. He quickly ordered his fleet to follow the trail of the signal. Zelker's fleet was composed of some of the most advanced ships in the galaxy. Their engines hummed quietly, faster than light travel, pushing them towards the source of the signal. They came across a small asteroid field and then saw it, the warship. It was floating there, almost motionless, hidden among the debris. Its surface was covered in layers of strange metal that seemed to pulse with an energy all its own. It looked like something that belonged in a forgotten time, a ship built with an ancient purpose. And yet, it was far from abandoned. It was alive. Zelker's curiosity grew. His species had never encountered humans before, but they had heard stories. Their reputation for being wild, unpredictable, and aggressive had spread across the galaxy. But no one had ever truly known how advanced humanity was. The humans were still considered a mysterious and dangerous species. No one thought they would ever pose a real threat. But now, Zelker was starting to wonder. His fleet moved closer, silently, like shadows in the night. They couldn't risk alerting the human warship. There was no telling what kind of weaponry or technology it had. Zelker wasn't worried, at least, not yet. But as they drew closer, he began to feel a sense of unease, something he couldn't quite explain. The hum of the signal seemed to grow louder, stronger, like it was calling to them. "Prepare to scan," Zelker ordered, his voice calm but commanding. His technicians began working quickly, setting up their scanners to gather data from the human warship. Zelker's ship hovered nearby, just out of range. He wanted to be cautious. But the curiosity was too strong. It was pulling him closer. His mind raced with questions. What kind of technology could a human warship have? Was it as primitive as the stories suggested? Or had they evolved faster than anyone had imagined? The technicians' screens lit up with data as they started their scan. A deep hum echoed from the warship, a noise that seemed to come from within its very core. The energy readings were off the charts. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered. There was something powerful hidden within the ship, something alive. They could sense it in the air, vibrating around them. But Zelker didn't feel fear. No, this was something else, something far more curious. "Scan complete," a technician reported. "Data is strange. The ship appears ancient, but the technology, it's advanced. Almost too advanced for humans." Zelker's mind raced. He had to know more. He wanted to see this warship up close. His fleet had never encountered anything like it before. A feeling of excitement surged through him. They had uncovered a hidden treasure, a puzzle to solve. And Zelker loved puzzles. "Send the data to the fleet," he ordered. "Let's see if we can learn more." But as the signal continued to hum, Zelker could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. This human warship, hidden so far from civilization, seemed almost waiting. As if it was expecting something. Or someone. He looked out of the window, gazing at the strange, silent ship. The closer they got, the more questions flooded his mind. What could this human warship do? And what would happen when the aliens finally made contact? It was only the beginning. The alien fleet hovered near the human warship, its eerie silence now unsettling to the alien commanders. Zelker couldn't shake the feeling that the ship was aware of them, even though there was no sign of life. It was as if it had been waiting, hidden in the vastness of space, for someone, anyone, to approach. Zelker's fleet had been silent for hours now. His ships drifted like shadows, their engines barely making a sound. The hum of the human warship still echoed through the void, reverberating across the cold emptiness. It was an odd, almost hypnotic noise, like a heartbeat in the stillness of space. It was becoming harder to ignore. "Commander," a voice broke through Zelker's thoughts. It was one of his senior officers, anxiously watching the readings on his screen. "The scan we performed earlier, it didn't give us all the answers we need. This ship, it's not just a warship. There's something else. Something inside." Zelker leaned over to observe the data. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the readings. The numbers on the screen were strange. The warship was emitting an energy field that didn't just block their scans, it seemed to distort them, like it was rejecting the very attempts to understand it. And that wasn't normal. Every alien ship they had encountered before had shown some level of vulnerability to their advanced technology. But this was different. How could something so primitive shield itself like this? Zelker muttered. He was beginning to sense that the human warship was no ordinary vessel. And if it was truly human-made, he couldn't begin to comprehend how they had achieved such technology. The commander turned back to the fleet. "We need to get closer. We can't afford to sit back and let this opportunity slip away." He had made his decision. He was going to learn more about this ship, even if it meant crossing a line. This was no ordinary scan. This was the first step toward understanding the power hidden within humanity. As the alien ships moved closer, a strange shift occurred. The human warship, which had been silent for so long, suddenly pulsed with energy. The hum grew louder, and the ship's surface shimmered with an unearthly glow, like it was waking from a long slumber. The change was sudden, as if something had been activated. Zelker's heart skipped a beat. Was this a defense mechanism? Or something more? The alien ships were now in position, their scanners locked on the human warship, ready to gather more data. But the moment they attempted another scan, something unexpected happened. A bright, sharp pulse of energy shot out from the human warship. It wasn't like anything Zelker had seen before, no weapon, no defensive shield, but a force that hit the alien fleet with a sudden shockwave. The energy radiated outward in a burst, sending the nearest alien ships reeling. "Report." Zelker barked, trying to maintain control. "Commander." "The fleet's shields are," the officer's voice faltered as he watched the display. The shockwave hit their defenses hard, and their shields were struggling to hold. They were being pushed back. It was like an invisible force, something that had no equal, no explanation. The alien fleet was caught off guard. Zelker's mind raced as he struggled to regain control of his ship. This was no mere defense system. Whatever this warship was, it was far beyond their expectations. The human warship wasn't just protecting itself. It was sending a clear message. "You can't just scan me," the message seemed to say. "You'll regret it." Zelker watched as the human ship's energy pulse slowly faded, leaving only the stillness of space in its wake. The alien fleet was left in stunned silence. The feeling of unease deepened. This wasn't an ordinary first encounter. Humanity, it seemed, had something the aliens had never anticipated, an unpredictable and dangerous power. Zelker gave the order to pull back slightly. He needed time to think. There were too many unknowns. The alien fleet had expected to be the dominant force in this encounter. But now, they were unsure. The human warship had just demonstrated something beyond their ability to understand. "Prepare for a full scan," Zelker said, though his voice was tinged with hesitation. "But this time, proceed with caution." But as he turned to face the rest of his fleet, he couldn't help but wonder, had they already made a mistake by provoking this warship? Had they just stirred something in humanity that they would soon regret? The answer, he feared, was about to become very clear. Zelker stood in the command center of his ship, watching the silent expanse of space through the viewing port. His mind buzzed with questions. How had humanity developed such an advanced weapon? Their warship wasn't supposed to be anything special. In fact, it was supposed to be outdated, a relic of a species struggling to survive in a galaxy full of far more powerful beings. Yet, what had just happened was far from ordinary. The alien fleet had suffered its first real setback, and it was still reeling from the shockwave that had hit them. No one in Zelker's fleet had expected the human warship to fight back in such an aggressive, unprovoked manner. They had underestimated humanity. They thought they were just another small, insignificant species. But now, that perception was rapidly changing. "Commander," a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was the officer who had been monitoring the fleet's shield status. The energy pulse, it wasn't just a defense mechanism. It's still emitting residual power. It's like nothing we've encountered before. Zelker's mind raced. He had always prided himself on his strategic thinking, but this was different. It was as if humanity had been hiding its true strength all this time, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash it. And now, the aliens were caught in the middle of that revelation. "We need to understand what we're dealing with," Zelker muttered, more to himself than anyone else. He didn't know if they were dealing with a defensive system, a weapon, or something entirely new. But he knew one thing for sure: humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had given them credit for. He gave the order to approach the human warship, but this time, it wasn't with the same confidence they'd had before. This time, they were cautious. Zelker had been in countless battles across the galaxy, but he had never faced a situation like this. The power emanating from the human warship seemed to be pulsing, almost as if it was alive. It was a constant thrum in the background of the fleet's operations, filling the void with a strange energy. The closer they got, the more intense the feeling became. Zelker could feel it in his bones, a kind of weight that pressed on him, the sensation that something was about to happen, but he couldn't predict what. It was unsettling. And then, just when they thought they had reached a safe distance, it happened again. A blast of pure energy shot out from the human warship, but this time it wasn't just a pulse, it was a continuous wave, like a massive wave of destruction that surged toward the fleet. The alien ships, still not fully prepared, tried to activate their shields, but the wave hit too quickly. It ripped through their defenses, cracking the strongest shields like they were paper. Zelker's ship shuddered under the force, and the lights flickered. It was as if the very fabric of their ship was being torn apart. His officers scrambled, trying to regain control of their systems, but it was like the human warship had just become the center of a storm that the aliens couldn't navigate. We're being overwhelmed," one of the officers shouted, panic creeping into their voice. Zelker's mind raced, but the situation was spiraling out of control. They were being pushed back, not by weapons or military strategy, but by a raw force of nature. The human warship had tapped into something beyond their understanding, something primal and powerful. The alien fleet was retreating, inch by inch. Zelker had never seen anything like this before. They had faced powerful enemies, yes, but nothing that had this sheer presence. This wasn't just technology. It was a force. Humanity had tapped into something deep, something that could bend the very laws of physics. "Stop the retreat!" Zelker barked, his voice laced with determination. "We need to regain control. Full power to all systems." But the damage had already been done. One of the alien ships had already sustained critical damage. Its hull was breached, and the energy pulse had disabled its engines. It was dead in the water, floating in space like a helpless hulk. The other ships were quickly falling back, their systems flickering, their energy reserves drained. Zelker watched helplessly as the once proud fleet he commanded began to retreat in disarray. The human warship had done more than just show its power, it had completely overwhelmed them, using a force that the aliens couldn't comprehend. And then, as if to emphasize their defeat, the human warship did something unexpected. It didn't continue the attack. It simply stopped. The energy pulse ceased. The ship fell silent again, as if it had never fired a shot. Zelker's fleet was left in stunned silence, the damage to their ships now only beginning to show. The alien commanders were looking at each other, unsure of what to do next. Had they miscalculated? Were they now facing a species they had completely underestimated? For the first time in his career, Zelker felt a deep, unsettling sense of dread. Humanity had just proven they could not only defend themselves, but that they could hold their ground in ways no one had expected. This wasn't just a fight. It was a warning. A warning that Zelker and his fleet might not be prepared for. For a long moment, the space around Zelker's fleet was still. The human warship, now silent, loomed in the distance like a shadow. The glow that had once emanated from it had faded, leaving only the cold emptiness of space behind. Yet, the weight of what had just happened lingered in the air. The fleet was shaken, its pride shattered in a matter of moments. Zelker stood in the command center, watching the damage reports flood in. His ships were limping. The shields were barely operational, the weapons systems damaged, and the engines strained. For a fleet that had once been the most feared in the galaxy, they now looked vulnerable, weak. The sudden realization gnawed at Zelker's mind. They weren't just dealing with an advanced human ship, they were facing something that had surpassed their wildest expectations. "Commander," one of the officers spoke hesitantly, "we've lost 2 ships. And the remaining vessels are in critical condition." The human warship, it didn't just defend itself. It powered up in a way we didn't think was possible. Zelker's mind raced. The human warship's power wasn't just technological, it was something more. It was as if the ship itself had awakened. But to what? The pulse of energy, the force that had blasted through his fleet, wasn't just a weapon, it was a warning. A demonstration of control, an assertion of dominance. And it had stopped. The warship wasn't firing because it had run out of power or because it had achieved its goal, it had stopped because it could. This realization hit Zelker like a thunderclap. The human warship was alive in a way that transcended its technology. It wasn't just a machine. It was something more. The ship had a mind, a presence that communicated a singular message: don't challenge me again. The fleet had no choice but to halt their advance. Any attempt to continue their attack seemed futile now. The humans had shown them that they were no mere prey. They were something else entirely, something that even the greatest minds in the galaxy could not predict. "Retreat," Zelker finally ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "Pull back to the edge of the system. We need to regroup and reassess." The alien fleet slowly began to withdraw, their ships drifting back into the cold expanse of space. But as they retreated, Zelker couldn't shake the feeling that the human warship was still watching them. Silent. Unmoving. But aware. There was no mistaking it now, their understanding of the universe had just shifted. As the alien fleet drifted away, something remarkable happened. The human warship did not follow. It did not pursue them, nor did it fire another shot. Instead, it simply observed. It sat there, alone in the emptiness, its energy field still pulsing with quiet power. There was no rush, no fear. It was as if the warship was content to let the aliens retreat, allowing them to live and learn from their mistake. But for how long? How long would it take before humanity's wrath would be unleashed again? Zelker knew the answer. It would be soon. Back on the alien ships, the crew members were left in stunned silence. They couldn't comprehend what had just transpired. Their fleet, which had once been unstoppable, had been brought to its knees by a species they hadn't even known existed until recently. The question that now weighed heavily on everyone's mind was simple: could they ever face humanity again? And if they did, what would be left of them? Commander, another officer's voice cut through the silence, we've received a transmission from the human warship. Zelker turned sharply, his heart skipping a beat. A transmission? He hadn't expected that. After everything that had happened, he assumed the humans wouldn't waste their time on them. But the message was clear. The alien ships began receiving a transmission, one that would echo across their minds. The words that followed would change everything. Next time, we won't hold back. Zelker's chest tightened. The cold weight of fear settled in as the transmission ended. The humans hadn't just made a statement, they had made a promise. A promise that was more than just a threat. It was a declaration of intent. Humanity, once thought to be weak, had shown the galaxy that they could, and would, defend themselves at all costs. And as the alien fleet continued its retreat, Zelker knew they had just made a powerful enemy. Humanity's message was clear, their warship was not a tool of war, but a symbol of what lay ahead. The aliens had seen a glimpse of what humanity was capable of, and it was more than they could have ever imagined. The war had only just begun. The alien fleet limped back through space, their engines humming weakly, their hulls marked by the scars of the unexpected battle. Zelker sat in the command center of his flagship, staring at the empty expanse of space, still haunted by the last words from the human warship. Next time, we won't hold back. The message was seared into his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had just delivered a warning they weren't likely to ignore. Back in the heart of the fleet, commanders and officers huddled around communication terminals, processing the data from the encounter. The mood was somber. The once proud and indomitable alien fleet was now a shadow of its former self, severely damaged and on the defensive. There were questions, endless questions, about how the human warship had become so powerful. How could something so seemingly primitive hold such an incredible force? What had they tapped into? We need answers, Zelker said, his voice heavy with command but laced with frustration. We've never encountered a species like this. Our entire understanding of warfare and technology is shattered. I want every resource dedicated to understanding what we just faced. The officers nodded, though no one seemed entirely sure where to start. The power of the human warship wasn't just in its weapons, it was in how the ship had responded to them. It was intelligent, aware, and its sheer energy output seemed to be tied to some unknown force. Humanity had turned their very assumptions about war into a weapon, and Zelker feared the consequences of underestimating them again. But as the fleet regrouped and started to recover, something unexpected happened. A new signal broke through the quiet hum of their communication systems. This one was unmistakable. It was coming from the human warship, but it wasn't a direct transmission. It was a message encoded in deep space frequency, a challenge. Zelker leaned forward. What is this? The message was brief. Simple. A single line of text flashing on the screen in bright, stark characters. Humanity's fleet is ready. Zelker's mind snapped to attention. The humans weren't just defending themselves anymore. They were preparing for war. Humanity had a fleet, and it was now clear that the warship wasn't a one-off anomaly. They had a force, and it was mobilizing. Initiate long-range scans. Find out where this fleet is, Zelker ordered, his voice firm despite the undercurrent of unease. His fleet might have been retreating, but now the true magnitude of their mistake was setting in. The human warship had been but a harbinger. The real challenge was coming. As the scan data came through, the reality of their situation hit like a hammer. The human fleet wasn't just gathering, it was already en route. Zelker's eyes widened as he read the results. They had amassed a force of warships, smaller than the alien fleet, but just as dangerous, if not more so. They had military-grade ships, and now it was clear that humanity had learned from their earlier attack. They had studied the alien technology, reversed engineered what they could, and prepared to hit back. Zelker couldn't help but feel a rising sense of dread. They had underestimated humanity, yes, but the truth was that they had made a far more catastrophic error. The alien fleet had been caught off guard by a single human warship. What would happen when they faced an entire armada? He stood up abruptly, his thoughts colliding. He knew they had no choice but to strike first. Humanity's fleet would be upon them soon, and if they waited too long, it would be their fleet that would be caught in the trap. We cannot allow them to build up any more strength, Zelker declared. We need to launch a preemptive strike. Full force. We hit their fleet before they're ready to strike us. The command was given, and the alien ships immediately began their preparations. Their engines hummed to life, and their weapon systems powered up with renewed purpose. The retreat was over. It was time for action. The aliens would not let humanity dictate the terms of this war. But as the alien fleet prepared to leave their staging area, the human warship transmitted once more. This time, it was not a message of warning. It was a declaration. We've already won the war. You just don't know it yet. Zelker felt a cold chill. The arrogance in those words was palpable, but it wasn't just arrogance, it was confidence. The human warship wasn't just protecting humanity's borders. It was claiming victory before the battle had even begun. The fleet moved forward into the unknown, their engines roaring as they headed for the new battleground. But in the back of Zelker's mind, the question lingered, had humanity already outsmarted them? The answer, Zelker feared, would soon be clear. The alien fleet surged forward, its ships cutting through the dark expanse of space, their engines firing with renewed intensity. Zelker's orders were clear, engage humanity before they could gain the upper hand. The fleet was wounded, but their pride remained intact. The aliens had made a critical mistake by underestimating humanity, but they were determined to correct it. They would strike first, and they would do so with everything they had. Zelker stood at the helm of his flagship, watching the distant stars flicker past. The cold, endless void outside felt suffocating, but his focus was sharp. The human warship, the source of all this turmoil, was still out there. And now, the rest of humanity's fleet was mobilizing. He couldn't allow them to establish a foothold in the galaxy. This was his moment to strike back, to reassert control. Prepare for the assault, Zelker ordered, his voice low and full of resolve. Launch all interceptors. Deploy forward batteries. We're taking their fleet down before it even has a chance to form a proper defense. The fleet moved into position, the sleek alien ships arranging themselves in a tight formation. They were ready for battle, ready to tear apart whatever humanity had managed to assemble. Zelker's heart beat with the rush of anticipation, but beneath that excitement, there was a gnawing doubt. His officers, though loyal and determined, shared his unease. The last encounter had rattled them all. The humans were different, dangerous in ways they hadn't expected. We have visual contact with the human fleet, Commander, one of the officers reported. They're coming in from the outer edge of the system. Zelker's eyes narrowed as he gazed at the holographic map on the command deck. The human ships, though smaller in number, had formed up in a disciplined and strategic pattern. The warships, sleek and sharp, were surrounded by smaller vessels that appeared to be escorting them, providing protection and flexibility. Their formation was tight, organized, more so than Zelker had expected. The human fleet was ready, but Zelker knew they weren't prepared for the raw power his fleet commanded. He had confidence in his firepower, and it was time to show humanity what they were up against. Engage the first wave, Zelker ordered. The alien fleet's weapon systems flared to life, and the first volley of laser blasts shot forward, streaking through the blackness of space. The human fleet responded instantly, their shields flaring bright blue as they absorbed the incoming fire. There was a moment of silence as the alien ships reassessed. Their first shots had done no damage. Impossible, muttered Zelker under his breath. Their shields are holding, better than expected. The human fleet wasn't just defending, it was adapting. The aliens had always prided themselves on their superior weaponry, but this was different. The humans had responded with shields that seemed impervious, shields designed to withstand the fiercest of attacks. "Commander, we've identified their ship formation," another officer called out. "They're using a combination of old-school tactics and new tech, like they've learned from every previous attack." Zelker clenched his fists. The humans were learning fast. They had adapted to every tactic the alien fleet had thrown at them, and now they were using it to their advantage. This wasn't just an army of soldiers, it was a force that could evolve mid-battle, something the aliens hadn't encountered before. "Recalculate our strike patterns," Zelker barked. "We need a new strategy. Prepare for a full bombardment." He knew the human warships would be powerful, but there was something more pressing: they were smart. Humanity wasn't just reactive. They had a plan, and it wasn't a traditional military one. The humans fought not just with weapons, but with an uncanny awareness of their surroundings, their strategy, and their technology. They were creating layers of defense and offense that seemed impossible to penetrate. As the fleet adjusted their tactics, one of the smaller human ships suddenly broke off from formation. It was a bold move, and Zelker watched with growing suspicion as it darted toward the center of the alien fleet. The human ship seemed almost unassuming, nothing compared to the massive warships. But its speed and precision were unmatched. "What are they doing?" an officer asked, eyes glued to the tactical display. "Don't focus on one ship," Zelker ordered sharply. "That's their trick. They're trying to mislead us." But even as he said it, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The human ship moved with an agility that was impossible for any other vessel to match. It didn't seem like a standard warship at all. It weaved in and out of their defensive perimeter, dodging blast after blast as though it were dancing with the stars themselves. And then, without warning, it launched a series of small projectiles, seemingly harmless at first. The alien fleet had no time to react. The projectiles detonated, unleashing a web of interconnected explosions that ripped through the alien ships. The precision was deadly, and the damage was catastrophic. It was a trap. The human ship had led them right into it, and the rest of the fleet was forced to follow, unable to avoid the chaos unfolding before them. "Full retreat!" Zelker shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos. But it was too late. The human fleet wasn't giving them the chance. The seemingly unassuming ship had decimated their formation, and now the entire human fleet descended upon them like a storm. Zelker's heart pounded in his chest. He had failed. The human fleet had turned his own forces against him, using their speed, precision, and unpredictable tactics to shatter the alien advantage. The war was no longer just about brute force, it was about intelligence, adaptability, and the human will to fight. As the alien ship scrambled to regroup, Zelker realized with a chilling certainty that this wasn't just a fight to the finish. Humanity had proven something greater than their might, they had proven that they could think their way to victory, outsmarting even the most advanced fleets. And the aliens? They were still learning the hard way. As the remnants of the alien fleet limped through the vast emptiness of space, the true weight of their defeat began to sink in. Zelker sat silently in his command center, eyes fixed on the flickering holographic displays that now showed their scattered fleet, crippled and in disarray. The earlier bombardment had shattered their formation, and now, as they pulled back, there was only one thought in his mind: how could they have been so blind? The human fleet, though smaller, had delivered a crushing blow that was more than just physical. It was a psychological defeat. The humans weren't just skilled soldiers, they were thinkers. They had taken the fight to the aliens in a way no one had ever anticipated. The humans had used their own weaknesses against them, luring them into a trap with the most unexpected methods. And in doing so, they had shown Zelker and his fleet the true nature of their enemy: unpredictability. He rubbed his temples, trying to clear his mind of the buzzing chaos that swirled within it. His fleet was damaged. The morale was low. They had underestimated humanity and now had to deal with the consequences. But worse than that, they were learning too much, too fast. The humans weren't just playing defense anymore. They were making a statement. They had proven they could fight back with ingenuity, with precision, and with force. This war wasn't going to be won by superior technology or sheer strength. It would be won by adaptability, by surprise. And the worst part? The humans seemed to thrive in uncertainty. "Commander," an officer's voice pulled him out of his thoughts, breaking the heavy silence. "We've detected another human signal. It's coming from deep within their sector." Zelker's eyes snapped to the officer, his heart quickening. "Another signal?" He leaned forward, a sense of urgency creeping into his voice. "What's the nature of this signal?" The officer hesitated before answering, uncertainty in his voice. "It's not a warning, Commander. It's a request. A call for a meeting." Zelker blinked, stunned. "A request? From them? After all this?" "Yes, Commander. The message is simple. We can end this, but we need to talk." Zelker sat back, confusion washing over him. It was a bold move, even for humanity. They had just delivered a devastating blow to his fleet, and now they wanted to negotiate. The audacity of the humans was beyond anything he had expected. But at the same time, there was something unsettling about it. A part of him felt that this wasn't a simple negotiation. This wasn't a plea for peace. This was another challenge, another test of their will. "Send the message through," Zelker said after a long pause. He had no choice. He would have to hear them out, at least for the moment. The humans had already proven they were unpredictable, but what were they really after? Was this just another trap? Or was there something deeper at play here? As the message went through, Zelker's fleet shifted course, moving toward the coordinates of the human signal. The journey felt longer this time, more weighted. The tension was palpable in the command center. His officers were on edge, unsure of what awaited them on the other side. The humans had already demonstrated that they could handle a direct confrontation. What was this meeting going to reveal? The alien fleet arrived at the location specified by the humans, hovering in the silence of space, its ships lined up like wary soldiers awaiting orders. They could feel the presence of the human fleet now, just beyond the veil of distant stars. It was there, waiting, but it didn't engage. It simply observed. "Is this a trap?" one of Zelker's officers muttered under their breath. "I don't know," Zelker replied softly, though his mind raced. "But I do know one thing, they're not done with us. This isn't a plea for peace. It's a move in a much larger game." Then, suddenly, the communication channel pinged. The human warship appeared on the display, its form bathed in the eerie glow of deep space. The transmission was coming through. Zelker knew it was time to face whatever challenge the humans had for him. The hologram flickered, and a human face appeared, calm, composed, but with an underlying intensity that made Zelker's skin crawl. This was the face of someone who had seen the storm, felt it, and yet stood unwavering. "I am Admiral Seraphine," the voice was firm but not hostile. "You felt the strength of humanity's resolve. Now, you will feel the consequences of underestimating us." Zelker's heart skipped a beat. So this was it. The next phase. "We're not asking for your surrender. But we are offering you a choice." Admiral Seraphine's words were measured, deliberate. "We know what you've come for. But if you continue this conflict, we will only fight harder. We will give everything we have. And you will be the ones who suffer the most." Zelker's eyes narrowed. "You think you've beaten us, but this is only the beginning." "Maybe," Seraphine said, a slight, almost imperceptible smile crossing her lips. "But we've already made sure the beginning is all we need. Your forces are scattered, weakened. We've studied your fleet. We've learned your strategies, your weaknesses. And now, we'll use that against you. You're already outmatched." The message hit Zelker like a blow to the chest. This was no longer just a skirmish. The humans were fighting with a deep, calculated intelligence, studying every move his fleet made. And they had already prepared for everything he could throw at them. Zelker clenched his fists. This is not over. Oh, it is, Seraphine said with quiet finality. You've already lost. The transmission ended, leaving Zelker and his fleet in stunned silence.